Morning, everybody. So let's finish up this C-15 6NZ twin turbo rebuild. This is the third assembly video. If you want to see how the block and the head and all that assembly goes, check out those first two videos. This video we're going to pick up with installing the twin turbo setup and go from there. I'll go ahead and kind of refresh everybody on the parts that went into this build, because I know everybody's interested in knowing, what you got to do to make the horsepower and make it hold up over time. And we'll finish up with an idea how much labor and cost went into this build, what it costs the customer anyway. So let me turn on some video here and we'll watch me work while I talk about the engine. Alright, I know this was in the last video, but just to refresh everybody's memory, here we got the lower turbo mounting bracket, and we had to take a 1/4 inch off of it because the mounting plate that you got to buy to attach an Acert turbo setup to an old block, it's a 1/4 inch thick plate. So just making it where that turbo is going to be hanging in the correct position relative to the top turbo. So anyway, let's go back to this block and what all we've done to it so far. First off, we've put IPD single piece steel pistons in it versus the factory pistons that had a 2-piece design with aluminum skirts. The single piece steel is much more resilient to heat. Then on top of that, so we don't have to worry about our head gasket blowing out, we put an O-ringed head, aftermarket head from American Premium Castings out of Washington State. These heads, they're really high quality, good heads. I've used several of them, never had trouble. You can buy them with a fire ring already in the head, so a lot faster and cheaper than having a factory head machined. On top of that, these heads have about 35% more coolant flow, which is just a big deal on a cat. If you can keep the head cool, keep it from cracking, that's key, that's critical. So then beyond that, we put a fuel pump off of a SDP engine. That'd be the Acert engine that they made in 08. That was pretty well totally junk. But that increases your fuel pressure significantly. You notice it when you put those on. You can see there we got an aftermarket exhaust manifold hanging on the side of the engine. That's a Steed Speed exhaust manifold, single piece manifold, superior to Caterpillar's in the fact that it's both better flow, as well as instead of being a 3-piece design, the single piece, you don't have to worry about exhaust leaks between the joints. And of course, we put a marine cam in this. We put a big tune in this, awfully big tune in it. The tuner said, that'd be a good start. He said we might tweak on it a little bit after it's in the truck and running, but it's going to run good with this tune. I guess the next big thing is these turbos themselves that we're putting on. As we've said, this is going to be a twin turbo setup off of Acert, and when researching that, found out that CAT actually made a 625 horse King of the Hill engine, is what they called it. And that turbo setup was actually identical to the normal 550 Acert or whatever, the lower horsepower turbos, aside from one particular piece. And that piece is the upper turbo, the high pressure turbo. The compressor housing on the King of the Hill is a larger compressor housing. So by changing that one side of one turbo, you basically have upgraded the whole system to the King of the Hill setup. However, try as I might, I searched and searched for that, and I could not find the housing by itself. So, giving up at that, I just went ahead and bought an entire upper turbo, brand new, for King of the Hill setup. It is $2,000, I think, but bought that off of Momentum Works, which was the same place that I bought the adapter plate for the twin turbo setup, and I think I got the exhaust manifold there while I was already buying off of them. Okay, so what you just saw me welding up on the welding table was the high pressure compressor housing. This is a Acert twin turbo setup, but obviously we don't want the pre-cooler that the Acerts had. So BH tubes, which they sell stainless tubing for your radiator tubes and your air-to-airs and stuff like that. Well, they make this pre-cooler delete kit, and you can see there that I was welding a V-flange onto the housing so that I can use a V-clamp to hold that tube, which will go to feed the air-to-air on the exhaust side of the engine. There's another stainless tube that comes in the kit and is between that U-shaped piece and the actual air-to-air. Altogether, that kit I think is a little less than $800, but pretty slick kit. So here we go, putting the air compressor on the engine. That big old beast of a compressor. So as far as the rest of the video goes, I really feel like this is pretty self-explanatory, boring stuff for the most part. There's a couple little things I thought I'd mention, but yeah, mainly on the blow-by tube, I like to put a little bit of right stuff on the barb before clamping the tube onto it there at the valve cover. Just a bit of sealant keeps oil from seeping out and make a mess of the valve cover down the road. It seems like they just naturally want to leak unless you do that. Also, in the fuel filter base there's a fuel pressure regulator, and we went ahead and changed that as we were doing everything else. Just kind of maintenance thing, one of those pieces that often gets forgotten about. So as I said, I think the rest of this video is pretty self-explanatory. Me assembling small parts and wiring and hooking up sensors, you know, stuff like that, just external to the engine. But I thought, as this is being played, I may talk about a few other things about the engine that I didn't really have time to earlier on. First, I want to talk about the head a little bit. That head I got from American Premium Castings out in Washington State, and I've got several heads from them, O-ringed and not O-ringed. I know I used a Detroit head of theirs once. I have no complaints at all about any of them. They've been good heads, performing well, doing what they're supposed to, cheaper than Caterpillar's heads, cooling better than Caterpillar's heads. However, here recently I was able to confirm a couple things that I just wasn't sure one way or another about, earlier. And so this is a Chinese head. The latest box had the sticker right on it, made in China. And it's a very distinctive box, plywood with orange and black collar scheme on it, and so very recognizable. And I had heard from other people that, yeah, that's just a Chinese box that, you know, they've sourced and they're selling you. With a name like American Premium Castings, and I'm sure it's why they chose the name, it sounds like something that might have been produced in the U.S., and that's the first rumor that I had heard when I first was buying their heads, was that, you know, it's American company, American head, stuff like that. But I've never seen any claim from them about that. It's not something I'm upset about, because, I mean, what isn't being produced in China anymore? The question is it a good product? And yes, I feel like it is. So, yeah, it's not a claim that was ever made by the company to me, you know. And I've been happy with them. They've got the heads out quick. Their prices have been fine in my book. But here in the last couple weeks, I've found other places that are selling the same heads, and they're selling them cheaper. So, you know, it all depends on who you have in your area and what they got for sale, but you might keep that in mind. Just now, as far as the performance of this engine, there's one last key critical aspect to the way this engine's going to run. At least in my experience, I'm pretty confident that's going to be the case. And that is something that's not actually part of the engine itself, but it will be installed in the truck alongside of this engine, and that is going to be a fuel system, you know, supplying fuel to the engine. The two well-known brands out there that I hear most is FASS and AirDog, and I've got experience with the FASS system before, but not the AirDog. And so basically my experience, you know, with high horsepower engines and these fuel systems is, I think, you know, you get to a certain point and that engine's demanding more fuel than it can suck through the factory fuel lines. I mean, they're number 10 lines from the tank, you know, up to the engine, but still, that's it's demanding a lot of fuel. And with at least with the FASS system that I've used on past applications, it made a drastic difference. In particular, there's a 40 pin cat that I built with a huge turbo and 58s and a big tune, and it would actually start getting hot, and exhaust temperatures would spike, and you know, it made it very hard to drive. When the FASS system quit working, we burned a motor up, and immediately he was having to be very cautious about what he was doing with the truck. It hurt his fuel mileage. It wanted to run hot, and it was all has to do with how much fuel that engine was getting. It needed and wanted the fuel to run right. And so in that case, we were running a 290 gallon per hour FASS system on it, with that 40 pin, the marine cam, the high pressure fuel pump, the FASS system, everything. We were running fuel pressures that were probably twice as high as a normal Caterpillar engine, and it really liked it. This engine, when it goes in its truck, the owner bought an AirDog system, and from what he told me, because I have no experience here with them, but from what he has told me, AirDog offers a system for a truck with stock horsepower up to 550 horse, and that's what they typically will sell you. But if you're going to be creating more power than that, you need to make sure that you ask them for the high horsepower AirDog system that's going to provide more fuel. The AirDog system actually gives you a ton of instructions on different ways to modify your fuel system. I know when I heard them, we implemented a couple of them, but not all of them. I think they don't account for having the bigger fuel pump, and so there's just a few different things. I felt like we didn't have to do everything they said, and we'd still have the engine running like we wanted. So here at the end, I figured we'd go ahead and give you all the numbers that everybody wants to hear. How much did it cost? How long did it take? All that sort of stuff. But before I give any numbers, I want to remind everybody this was stripped all the way down. We put a lot of aftermarket parts on it. It's definitely the most expensive rebuild I've done. The time was about normal for out of frame that you tear down to this extent. But we had a lot of costs that I wouldn't have in a normal rebuild. We had a couple $1,000s in that exhaust manifold. We put that high pressure turbo on as a couple $1,000s. We had the mounting plate for the Acert setup. That was, I think, $360 or something like that. We had the pre-cooler delete kit. It was $780. We had to buy an oil pan for this. That was, I forget. That was a little over $1,000. You know, there's a lot of parts there that you wouldn't necessarily have to buy for every rebuild. At the end of the day, let's see, we had, oh, math is hard. So we had $32,817 in parts, and that would be the tune as in that figure as well, and the work at the machine shop, polishing the crank and decking the block. I don't know if I mentioned it in the build-up, but you know, aside from the parts that I said specifically were aftermarket, like the cylinder kits, the head, the oil pan, and the some of those other parts, everything else was Caterpillar parts. I used Caterpillar O-rings and gaskets and seals. We used a Caterpillar balancer, Caterpillar oil cooler, Caterpillar cam. So a lot of these parts are more expensive than they would be if you went strictly aftermarket, but it is my customer's preference. So $32,800 in parts, and my labor was $57.75. That's about 55 hours worth of work. So that was me in my shop doing this job. Anyway, I guess if you got any questions other than will I build an engine for you, you know, put them in the comments. As far as building engines for just about anybody right now, I'm too busy for the foreseeable future. I've had plenty of people ask, and I appreciate that, but it's just something I can't do right now. Life is stressful enough as it is. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the videos. I hope they're helpful. I hope they gave you stuff to think about. And if you liked them, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.